Hello everybody, and thank you for your time and joining me today in today's Daf Yomi Masechet Makkos Daf 4 Amud B. So just give a quick introduction. And today's Daf is crucial for understanding the process of warning Hat Ara, a potential sinner, which is foundational to capital punishment in the Jewish court. Key points: the nature of Hat Ara. The Gemara debates what exactly constitutes a valid warning. Does the court need to inform a criminal only of the prohibition, or must they also specify the consequence, malchus lashes or misa death, for a specific act? The initial Tana in the Mishnah stage seems to hold the consequences must be explicitly stated, a suffix and liability, a doubt and liability. A major discussion centers on the principle of suffix deraisa l'chumrah. If there is a doubt concerning a prohibition, Torah prohibition is decided strictly. The Gemara asks, if there is a doubt about whether the warning was valid, can the court still administer punishment? The general conclusion is that we do not punish on the basis of a doubt when it comes to capital or corporal punishment. The case of lying witnesses. The Daf also continues its discussion on false witnesses, Eidir Zomimim, and how they are punished. The principle is that they are punished according to what they plotted, Ka'asha Zaman, but only after the court proceedings are complete. In conclusion, Makkos 4b meticulously establishes that in Jewish law, corporal punishment is reserved for the absolute certainty of guilt, hinging entirely on a perfectly executed pre-warning and the unambiguous testimony of witnesses. The slightest legal doubt is enough to exempt the sinner from the lashes. Okay, so let's actually dive into the text now. Gemara. With regard to initial dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis in the Mishnah, whether conspiring witnesses pay or flogged, the Gemara asks, granted. According to the rabbis, that the verse states, the judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before him according to the measure of his wickedness in Deuteronomy 25:2. It is written concerning one who is liable to receive lashes. From according to the measure of his wickedness, it is inferred with regard to an individual who commits one transgression for one evil doing. So what does that mean? Loman l'Rabbanan mishum risha achas. This discussion applies exclusively to the first dispute in the Mishnah, which explores whether a conspiring witness receives two punishments for performing one action, i.e., whether he is both flogged and pays the money that they conspired to render the accused liable to pay. With regard to the second dispute, whether one is flogged with two sets of lashes, even the rabbis concede that the phrase in the verse, according to the measure of his wickedness, does not exempt one from being flogged with two sets of lashes if he violated two prohibitions in the performance of one action. This is explained in several places in the Mishnah, says the Rashash. What's the other footnote? A person is not both flogged and rendered liable to pay remuneration for violating one prohibition. In any case when one is flogged, he is exempt from payment, with the exception of conspiring witnesses who pay and are not flogged, based on a Torah decree. And that's the Rambam Tet Sefer Nashim, Hilchot Na'ara Betula 111, Sefer Zerayim, Hilchot Terumah 6:6, and Sefer Nezikin, Hilchot Geneva 3:1. And you can render him liable, but you cannot render him liable for two evil doings. One cannot receive two punishments for the same act. But according to Rabbi Meir, what is the reason that he is punished twice for committing a single transgression? Well, it said, Rabbi Meir derived this halacha from the halacha concerning one who defamed his wife, claiming that when he consummated the marriage, he discovered that she was not a virgin. Just as the defamer is flogged and pays, motzi shema, the defamer, if one defamed a young Jewish woman, claiming that when consummating the marriage he discovered that she was not a virgin, and it subsequently determined that he lied, he is flogged and pays a fine of 100 silver coins. This halacha is an exception to the principle that one does not receive two punishments in violating one prohibition, due to the fact that both punishments are explicit in the Torah. That's in Rambam Sefer Nashim, Hilchot Na'ara Betula 3:1. As it is written, and they chastise him and fine him 100 silver coins, Deuteronomy 22:18-19. And so too, anyone who commits a transgression punishable with lashes and a monetary payment is flogged and paid. The Gemara questions its derivation. What is notable about the case of a defamer? It is notable in that the payment of the defamer is a fine, which is a fixed sum that the Torah deems him liable to pay. How can a halacha of conspiring witnesses whose payment is monetary restitution be derived from there? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Meir holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says the payment that conspiring witnesses are liable to pay is a fine. The Gemara comments, there are those who teach a statement of Ula with regard to that which is taught in the Braita. It is stated with regard to the Paschal offering, and you shall let nothing of it remain until morning. One who intentionally leaves over meat of the Paschal offering until the morning on the 15th of Nisan, and likewise anyone who fails to partake of sacrificial food within its appointed time violates the prohibition. He is not flogged for the latter violation because it is a prohibition that entails fulfillment of a positive mitzvah. Because of Mishnah the Melech, who discussed whether the Rambam does not base his ruling on the fact that it is prohibited, that it is a prohibition that does not involve an action. Rambam Sefer V'On Hilchot P'sulei HaMikdashin 18:9, Sefer Korban Hilchot Korban Pesach 10:11. Till morning, but that which remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. Exodus 12:10. The verse comes to provide a positive mitzvah to burn the remains after it has taught a prohibition, which states, you shall not let nothing of it remain. To say that one is not flogged for its violation, this is a statement of Rabbi Yehuda. There is a prohibition whose transgression entails the fulfillment of a positive mitzvah, in which the mitzvah serves to rectify the violation of the prohibition and no actions are administered. Rabbi Akiva says the fact that one is not flogged is not that for that reason, rather it is due to the fact that this prohibition, and you shall let nothing of it remain, is a prohibition that does not involve an action, as one violates the prohibition through failure to take action, and concerning any prohibition that does not involve an action, one is not flogged for its violation. The Gemara learns from it, by inference, that Rabbi Yehuda holds it in principle with regard to a prohibition that does not involve an action, but one is flogged for its violation. But where does Rabbi Yehuda derive that one is flogged in that case? Well, instead, Rabbi Yehuda derived this halacha from the defamer. Just as the defamer violates a prohibition that does not involve an action, as it involves only speech, and one is flogged for its violation, so too, because any prohibition that does not involve an action, one is flogged for its violation. The Gemara questions this derivation. What is notable about the case of the defamer? It is notable in that he is flogged and pays for violation of a single prohibition. Due to that stringency, others less stringent prohibitions cannot be derived from the case of the defamer. By the way, Shlaka says, Rabbi Yehuda derives this principle from the case of conspiring witnesses. Just as the conspiring witnesses violate a prohibition that does not involve an action, an individual is flogged for its violation, so too with regard to any prohibition that does not involve an action, one is flogged for its violation. The Gemara questions its derivation. What is notable about the case of conspiring witnesses? It is notable in that the witnesses do not require forewarning. Conspiring witnesses are punished even without forewarning. On the Sefer Shoftim Hilchot Idut 18:4, Chashon Mishpat 38, in order to administer their punishment, which is an exception to the principle that corporal punishment will be administered only after forewarning. Due to that stringency, other less stringent prohibitions cannot be derived from the case of conspiring witnesses. The Gemara answers, the case of the defamer will prove that the absence of forewarning is not a significant factor, as the defamer requires forewarning, and nevertheless is flogged for a prohibition that does not involve an action, and the inference has a virtuous starting point. The defining characteristic of this case is not like the defining characteristic of that case. The defining characteristic of that case is not the defining characteristic of this case. The common denominator is that both cases there is a prohibition that does not involve an action, one is flogged for its violation. So too, with regard to any prohibition that does not involve an action, one is flogged for its violation. The Gemara questions this derivation. What is notable about that common denominator? They are notable in that payment in both cases is a fine, and therefore other less stringent prohibitions cannot be derived from them. The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. Rabbi Yehuda does not hold in the contrary opinion of Rabbi Akiva that the payment of conspiring witnesses is a fine. In his opinion, therefore, that is not a common denominator. Rather, the Gemara proposes an alternative refutation. What is notable about that common denominator? They are notable in that the cases of the defamer and the conspiring witnesses both contain a stringent aspect. Therefore, other less stringent prohibitions cannot be derived from them. The stringency in the case of the defamer is that he is both is flogged and pays. Stringency in the case of conspiring witnesses is that they do not require forewarning. The Gemara answers, and Rabbi Yehuda does not refute derivation from a common denominator based on the fact that both cases contain a different stringent aspect. He holds that the mere fact that there is a stringency in each case does not serve as a common denominator. The Gemara resumes its analysis of the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. In the case of conspiring witnesses who testify that another is liable to receive lashes, Rabbi Meir holds that they are flogged with 80 lashes. 1 set of lashes due to violation of the prohibition, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbour, in Exodus 20:13, and 1 set of lashes due to the verse, you shall do to him as he conspired, in Deuteronomy 19:19. The rabbis say they are flogged with only 40 lashes due to the verse, and you should do to him as he conspired. The Gemara asks, and with regard to the rabbis concerning this verse, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbour, what do they derive from it? If one is not flogged with violation, the Gemara answers, they require that verse as a prohibition against conspiring witnesses. Every punishment enumerated in the Torah, including that of conspiring witnesses, is accompanied by an explicit verse prohibiting the action that results in punishment. The Gemara asks, and with regard to Rabbi Meir, who holds that the conspiring witnesses are flogged for violating the prohibition, from where does he derive the prohibition for conspiring witnesses? Rabbi Yirmiyah said, he derives it from the verse written in the context of conspiring witnesses, and those who remain shall hear and fear, and shall not continue to perform any more evil of this kind in your midst. In Deuteronomy 19:20, the verse warns the conspiring witnesses should not continue with their sinful conduct. The Gemara asks, and considering the rabbis, what do they derive from that verse? The Gemara answers, that verse is necessary according to the rabbis for the requirement of proclamation. So this moves into the next one. I'll just define what proclamation means. A court that sentences conspiring witnesses rise and sends to every city a proclamation that so and so testified were rendered conspiring witnesses, and they received such and such a punishment, i.e. execution, lashes, or monetary payment. Rather than say for sure, in Hilchot Idot 18:7 and Hilchot Mamrim 3:8. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best. Bye.